Hello and welcome to your last lesson on the respiratory system. It's been a nice short 1 week unit that you've done mostly at home on your own, but I think it's pretty straightforward. So our last topic today is respiratory disorders. Obviously we can't cover every possible respiratory disorder, so I just picked a couple of the main ones that we'll talk about. But before we do that, I just wanted to review this. This diagram is not in your original PowerPoint, but if you've done your homework, I think it was 8-1, and you look at the structure, you should know the structure of the respiratory system. So we know how air gets in either through the nose or the mouth, but you've got your trachea. The trachea separates into two spots. You've got your left and your right bronchus. Bronchus is singular, bronchi would be plural. Then the bronchi divide into smaller bronchioles, and at the end of each bronchiole, you've got those alveoli. Alveolus singular, alveoli are plural, are the air sacs, and the alveoli, that's where between the alveoli and the blood, that's where you get that gas exchange, and that's where basically your respiratory system and circulatory system interact. So the air you breathe makes it all the way to your alveoli, and then at the alveoli, the oxygen diffuses into the blood. Carbon dioxide diffuses from blood to the alveoli, and when you breathe out carbon dioxide. So you should be familiar with the structures. So today we're going to talk about some of the disorders. We're going to talk about mainly the bronchi, and then we'll talk about bronchioles and alveoli, and obviously the lungs. So I just wanted you to make sure that you're familiar with the structures before we talk about the disorders. So the first one is a cough. So we never think about cough as a respiratory disorder. Now a cough is actually a good thing. Not nowadays with COVID. A cough means something entirely different. So this was made pre-COVID. Like I said, you have an entire assignment on your own just about COVID, the signs, the symptoms, and the effects. But in general, a cough is a good thing. It's a protective mechanism. It's a protective reflex. So when you cough, that's your respiratory system way of getting something out. So when you have something foreign inside of your respiratory system, you cough because you're trying to get it out. Again, I'll use that word. It is fascinating. Your body it's just so perfectly balanced and in tune. It's not supposed to be here. I'm going to cough to expel it. So cilia, we learned about cilia in our first unit. We learned about the structures of the cell. So we know that cilia are like these fine hairs, right? Latin for eyelashes. So you've got these fine hairs throughout the body. So your respiratory system is lined with cilia. And then if anything foreign is there, they basically expel it and try to get it out. That's when you cough. So the cilia are trying to sweep out anything that's foreign inside of it. So that is a good thing. So when you have a cough, many, many years ago, way before COVID, pre-COVID, I did have a cough, and I remember I went to the pharmacy, and one of our former students was a pharmacist there. And then this is what I learned from a former St. B student who was a pharmacist. So at that point I had a cough, and she told me, when you're looking for cough medicines, now I put cough medicines are bad. It depends which one you buy. So if you buy a cough medicine, you'd have to look. Some of them are called cough suppressants. A cough suppressant is bad because a cough suppressant basically is a sedative. So it's going to slow down your cilia and stop them from doing their job. So you might think, oh, it's good. I took a cough suppressant. I'm not coughing anymore. I'm better. Well, no, that cilia is a good thing because they're trying to expel something foreign. So she taught me if you have a cough, you would take something called an expectorant. So cough expectorant, so basically helps promote expelling whatever is there. But again, this is pre-COVID. So again, be familiar with the signs. I don't want to scare you if you have a cough. Doesn't mean you have COVID, but coughing is one of the signs and symptoms of COVID. So this was made pre-COVID. So like I said, remember we need to use our brain and think about the context of any of these signs and symptoms. Okay, so that's what I learned from a St. B graduate pharmacist. So again, cilia, fine hairs, we know about that. Asthma, I know lots of students have asthma. Either you have asthma or someone in your family does or your friend does. That's how common asthma is nowadays. So asthma affects the bronchi. We already talked about that. So it's when the bronchi overact to basically normal things that shouldn't have an effect. For some reason, these things are typically normal, but for some people, this triggers a reaction in their body. So the bronchi are overreacting to things that are typically harmless. Now, what are your triggers? It is different for everyone. Every year, we do as a staff get trained from a nurse that comes in, and she trains us on different disorders, and asthma is one of them. And she has a list, and basically, you name it, it's basically an asthma trigger. So most common things would be pollen, dust, animal dander, perfumes, chemicals, cold air, certain foods, medication, stress, exercise. That is not a complete list. So if you have asthma or know someone that does, For some reason, certain things trigger it. So especially at your age, you should know what your triggers are. You should know how to either avoid them or minimize your risk. Or if you can't, many of you, and I think that's the next slide, probably have an inhaler. So like I said, probably you're familiar with that. The treatment or prevention is a bronchodilator. Bronchodilator dilates your bronchi. Very literal. And the reason why we use bronchodilators, because this is what it looks like. So that's a normal bronchus. You can see it's like almost like a pipe. This is someone with asthma. Do you see the difference? So when you're trying to breathe and get air in, this should be pretty easy to get air through. Look at this, it's very constricted. There's hardly any room for that air to come in. So if you know someone with asthma, I don't, but a lot of my friends do. Symptoms would be wheezing, coughing, trouble breathing. And like I said, you can see from the picture, this explains exactly why those symptoms exist and why the treatment would be a bronchodilator. It dilates, so it makes more room, so the air, it's easier for the person to breathe. And like I said, why does this happen? For some reason, some people, they're just triggered by certain things that most people experience every day and aren't affected by, and some lucky people, they just get that reaction. So that is asthma. Next one is emphysema. So this is one that affects the alveoli. We've talked about the alveoli. Your bronchi divide into bronchioles, and at the end of each bronchiole or alveoli, that is the site of gas exchange. So if you've been doing your homework this week, you know about the alveoli, their structure, their function. So emphysema is when they lose their elasticity. They become stretched and filled with stale air. You can't get enough oxygen to the cells. So that is the primary site of gas exchange. So if your alveoli are damaged and not functioning properly, well, how are you going to get oxygen to all your cells? How are you getting carbon dioxide out? We've talked about that cellular respiration, gas exchange, every unit. That is vital to our health. So if you can't get that proper gas exchange, that's problematic. So that's emphysema. So symptoms would be shortness of breath, fatigue. Causes are smoking, air pollution. Like I said, this is just showing you again the function, normal healthy alveoli, and those are ones that are weakened, collapsed, excess mucus. That's an emphysema lung. Now, we used to have a SWAT team, students working against tobacco. They talk about tobacco and vaping. So obviously we know the dangers of smoking. Vaping is not safe either. I don't know why it seems some younger people think vaping is cool and not as bad as smoking. Not true. So yes, don't be fooled by, just don't be fooled. Yeah, so if you know your biology, you wouldn't be smoking, you wouldn't be vaping, you wouldn't want to add anything to your respiratory system that doesn't need to be there. Why would you make it harder for this system to function? This is vital to get oxygen to every cell, carbon dioxide out. You need that to survive. Why would you do anything to disrupt or damage that system? Smoking and vaping as well. And bronchitis, oh, so point of that, so we used to have the SWAT team. So I think the SWAT team, they used to have a lung, they'd have a lung, I don't think it was an emphysema lung, but I had one with cancer we'll talk about right away. So I know some of you maybe were involved in that, and they actually would go around and show lungs like this to students. And bronchitis, very literal, bronchitis affects the bronchi. It's an inflammation of the bronchi, and again, if they get inflamed, you've just got less air, space, volume for the air to get through, so it's harder to breathe. So large amounts of mucus are produced, obviously that would trigger coughing. So the cause could be viral or a bacterial infection. When I was younger, like when I was in university, every year I got bronchitis. I don't know why. I think it might have been, obviously, I've never smoked and I don't smoke, and I'm very proud of that. I do not smoke, I do not vape, never have, never will. But I was just catching it with either a viral or bacterial infection when I was in university. So every year in university, I'd go to the doctor because I had bronchitis. Chronic bronchitis would be a cough for 3 or 4 months, and it recurs annually in the winter. And causes would be smoking, asthma, emphysema. But like I said, that would be chronic bronchitis. Mine wasn't chronic. I just happened to get it every year, and I definitely wasn't smoking or vaping, but just obviously university stress, not sleeping well, eating well. And every winter I would get bronchitis in university. Okay, and the fifth and final one is lung cancer. So cancer of any type, you did learn about cancer in grade 9 science, is basically just overactive mitosis. Mitosis is a good thing that happens all the time that we need. Mitosis is just cell growth. For some reason, when you get uncontrolled cell growth, you can have tumors, and that's what cancer is. So any kind of cancer is just too much mitosis. So if you have too much mitosis happening in the lungs, you could get a tumor in the lungs. That would be lung cancer. So the problem with lung cancer, having tumors in your lungs, it decreases the surface area for diffusion. Oh, this is all Unit 1. Remember Lab 6, we talked about surface area and diffusion. So like I said, everything we learned connects. So again, that would be, this is a lung, I don't know how well you can tell, there'd be tumors on the lungs. That's one of the, well, it's one of the signs of lung cancer. Oh, and that's all I said about lung cancer. But again, obviously the causes would be smoking, vaping. Sometimes it's secondhand smoke. I've had people in my family that have had lung cancer. They've had parts of their lung removed and they did eventually pass away from it. And the cause was smoking. But I've known people with lung cancer that have never smoked, but it would be secondhand smoke exposure. So like I said, I don't want to scare you, but we make healthy choices. Your generation is so informed. You've got so much information. You know the causes, the effects, the structure. So don't smoke, don't vape. What, like, if you know your biology, you would never smoke or vape. Okay, and I've left you some videos to look at, just like we don't have time to explore every disease and disorder. The joke, which is not a joke, you take my breath away, that is not a joke. That is true, that is literal. Cigarettes, vaping, don't do it. So your assignments that we've been working on this week, because we can't do the respiratory labs because of COVID, that yes, blowing a balloon is considered a high-risk activity now. We're working on a COVID-19 worksheet. I made the worksheet last year, but it still applies this year. The world has been shut down by a respiratory disease. So we need to understand that, especially as biology students, if you're a Bio-30S, if you study the respiratory structure, the respiratory system, and can't talk about COVID and how it affects it and why people with COVID are in ICU on ventilators, then you haven't really learned what you should about the respiratory system. So we need to be able to connect what we're learning in class to what's happening in the world. So you have today's class to finish up that assignment, and it will be due on Teams. Check our website for the due dates. I found this joke this time last year, and unfortunately this joke still applies now, and it's not a joke. Let me just read for you. The spread of COVID-19 is based on two factors: how dense the population is, how dense the population is. I will leave it at that, and you can interpret that as you will. So and that concludes our respiratory system. So I know it's a Friday, but you have today's class to complete that worksheet and make sure you hand it in on Teams. Check the website for the due dates and times. And that concludes our system. You will be having a test on this next week. And yes, have fun doing your worksheet. Bye.